Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so I hope you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from the USA and Spain, co-production, English language, released in the year 2016, directed by Carlos Torrens, and this film is called Pet. So Pet is about this animal shelter worker. He's very lonely, he connects a lot better to animals than he does humans. He tries to strike out conversations with his workmates, but they want nothing to do with him. So he longs for companionship, and he believes he's found companionship when he rides the bus and he comes across this woman that he hasn't seen since his high school days. So he says to the woman, they used to be friends, let's go out for something to eat. But she says no, she doesn't remember him, and please leave her alone. But he doesn't take this as an answer. He basically goes home, looks her up on Facebook, looks at all her likes and dislikes, and thinks that he's going to wow her over eventually. So he finds out where she works as a waiter at this restaurant. He goes for something to eat, and this is where the female says, look, can you just leave me alone? But the more she rejects him, the more aggressive he becomes, up into the point where he decides to kidnap her, take her to the basement of this animal shelter, put her into a cage and says, look, you're not coming out of the cage until you learn to love me. But what he doesn't realise is that there's a lot more to this woman than first met the eye, and it could well be that he is in danger himself. So it's going to be a battle of wits, and who comes out of this basement is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Pet. This was a very psychologically intense look at two different people coming together in a very explosive situation. Now this is a movie about two different extremes. On one hand, you've got a guy who can't relate to people, who doesn't know what love is, who doesn't really know how the world works, and is a victim of his circumstances. Then you've got this woman who's very arrogant, very pretty, very self-assured, and she doesn't know what it's like to live this life that this man is living. So when they both come together, they don't understand each other, and it's basically a ticking time bomb. And I thought that ticking time bomb between these two main characters was by far the best part of this film, is because it does rely basically on one setting between two people. And I think the fact that the acting was so good by Dominic Monaghan and Xenia Solo, I think that really helps contribute to the overall mood that the movie wants, to prevent you from becoming bored. And so that is by far the film's biggest plus, is that the script is very good. I thought the acting was great to complement it, and I just thought the way that these characters are forever evolving, it never stays static. So it doesn't really give itself an opportunity to be bored. And a lot of films out there, you've got the good guy, you've got the bad guy, it's going to be a battle of wits to see how the good guy is going to defeat the bad guy, and that's it. And after a while that can become quite predictable, and as a result of that can become quite boring. But in this movie, all these characters have baggage to them, and that baggage evolves them to a point where you didn't initially think they were. So for example, you've got Dominic Monaghan's character, who once, he does another fantastic job as this guy who is very relatable. He does have a lot of sympathetic qualities where he feels a little bit pathetic, and you think to yourself, okay, I could befriend that guy, because he really wants to, have banter with his people that he works with, but it's his lack of social skills that are preventing him from doing that. So it's the circumstances that are basically moulding the person that he is. And he wants to feel love, but he doesn't understand what love is. And if you don't understand what love is, and you want to find love, and you want someone to love you, you can't just force them to do that. And when you try to force them to do it, how horrific the overall scenery can be. And so I thought that character from Dominic Monaghan was by far the most interesting, is because he was sympathetic, and he was so much more than just a stereotypical cardboard cutout villain. Then you've got Xenia Solo, who plays this sweet, innocent victim, a very pretty victim. You've got this woman who appeared to have everything to live for. She was very popular, she had a good job. But then all of a sudden, when she's put into this extreme situation, she starts to become a different person, and you think that the tables are turning, and that who is the villain here? Initially I thought this guy was the bad guy, but is in fact this person the bad guy? And so because it turns it on its ear, there's a lot of suspense, and there's a lot of unpredictability, and all of a sudden you think that, okay, my comfort has been shifted to a completely different area. And because it's been shifted, and because your certain sense of security has been shifted, you don't know where to go. And because you don't know where to go, the director has you on a string, basically has you on edge, to the point where you actually never feel bored. And because you're on edge, you want to know how this movie is going to unfold. And I thought for the majority of this film, it does a good job at giving that curiosity and giving that level of suspense, because the unpredictability is not there. You think it is there, but then all of a sudden that sense of security is gone. So the acting very good, the script very good, cinematography. As I said, the majority of this film takes place in one setting, which I thought was very well done. It could have been boring. This movie could have been very boring, but fortunately, where it needed to succeed in this area, it really does. So the cinematography, very cold and dank. You felt the overall cruelty that the movie had coming through. I like the overall idea of comparing this female in the cage to the caged dogs that this guy was caring for. And so it's the And basically, she wasn't, she was treated just as, these dogs were. And so it gave you the insight into this guy's psychology, in that he's going to treat her like a dog, and until she can love him, she's going to stay there. And so you think, okay, well, because there's so much ignorance in this world that this director has created, you don't know how this is going to pan out. So the runtime of the film was fairly well done. I mean, it never got stuck down with unnecessary material. But then this is where I come to my two glaring problems. Now, my biggest problem with this film was the fact that it didn't have much subtlety at all. Now, there was subtlety at the start of the film, and you think to yourself, okay, well, that was very strange. What's going on here? And then all of a sudden, mind games start to play through your head. And when mind games start to play, you create the monster in the corner of the room, in the shadows. You can't see the monster, but you know it's there. And because you don't know what's actually happened, you have all these things happening in your head, and it's snowballing that monster. But then all of a sudden this movie decides to cut all that subtlety out, go back into flashbacks, and basically document everything that's going on. But the problem is that we could already guess what's happened. And when he dumbs it down to the point that he does, you feel like, hey, well, all the suspense is gone and all that curiosity is gone. And why he had to do that is that I believe he didn't have the confidence in his filmmaking, and he didn't have the faith in the fact that the viewer would have a brain. And so if you're going to dumb it down, unfortunately a lot of directors out there do this. I thought the overall subtleties to this film at the start of the movie, that odd clue here and there, the very vague sort of environment that the movie was set in, I thought was a lot scarier than it was when it decides to actually explain everything that's going on. So that was my biggest problem to the film. But then another problem I had was in the last quarter. Now, the ending was very good. I really liked the way it finished. It was very morbid, but unfortunately it was getting from point A to point B. Now, point A was the last third. Point B, the ending, but in between that, I thought it was cut out. There was a lot of things that weren't explained, and I thought it was done to the point, for the simple fact that the director didn't know how to get to point A to point B. But he was so persistent, and he was so hell-bent on getting to point B, that he was going to cut a lot out. And a lot wasn't explained. I constantly asking myself, what happened to this character? How did these characters end up in this situation? How did they get past security? All these questions that weren't answered because of the fact that it felt like a lot was cut out. So there's a lot of suspension of disbelief. The director is basically saying, just believe the story, this is how it happened, and it's got a cool ending. But unfortunately, I thought that the movie really should have gone from point A to point B in a completely different direction. Could have been a lot more realistic, and it would have really suited the film. And for that, I really thought it let it down quite considerably. So those two problems I had with the film, not many problems, but unfortunately they were very big problems that do prevent it from being a good film. So overall, for Pet, I'm only going to give this one 2.5 stars. Has a lot of good things going for it, so for that reason I would say go out there and see it at least once. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching my videos, and I'll see you later.